Alright, team, so we are back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And today we're looking at a translation that happened like earlier this month, but the translation or the information itself comes from like 2020. It's actually like years old. And the information comes from the Remake Ultimania back in 2020. And I don't know if anybody had ever translated this particular part before. I know there's people doing translations back then, and there's people doing like translations of like other Ultimanias currently right now. And I think that I don't recognize this piece of information, so I assume that it's kind of a relatively newer thing, which is why it's kind of making the rounds and there's articles picking it up and stuff. Because if this was like a popular translation back in like 2020, I 100% would have covered it because it involves Final Fantasy XII, which is a game that I absolutely love. And the translation comes from the Shinra Archaeology department on Twitter, which is the best translation Twitter account out there right now as far as I'm aware, because they're covering like every single aspect of FF7 from 1990 interviews until now. Anyways, the translation reads, FF7 Remake's lead battle programmer Satoru, I think is how Google told me to pronounce that, Koyama, says that for the next game, he'd like to create an AI that can juggle a variety of techniques and magic in addition to simply attacking and guarding. He says his goal is to surpass Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system. For those that may not know what the Gambit system is in Final Fantasy XII, it's a system that allows you to set what your characters will do in and out of combat, and it can cover literally every single aspect of combat in terms of exactly when a character will heal, whether that's 50%, 30%, reviving down characters, curing status ailments, attacking enemies with specific magics that they might be weak to, etc., etc. But there's actually an insane amount of freedom for what you can do with this, because you can really make it do anything. Like, you can have, like, ally HP 40%, cast protect, right? And, like, why would you do that? I don't know why you do that, but you can. That's a possibility. You could also do, like, enemy HP 30% cast blind. Like, that's not an optimal setting for the Gambit system, but that's just the kind of freedom that you have. And one of the things I've been doing with this recent playthrough that I never actually thought of using before is that when one of my teammates are affected with slow, you have another character cast haste on that character. So that way you're not only curing the slow, you're actually doing even better because the character's going to be performing faster, obviously. It's also worth mentioning that the Gambit system works in order from top to bottom, so whatever's at the very top will always take priority, which is why you see at the top of a lot of Gambit system lists ally KO Phoenix down. That way, as soon as an enemy kills one of your teammates, you'll automatically bring them back, obviously. It's also worth mentioning that you can turn off and on individually these Gambits, or you can turn off the Gambit system entirely per character. Despite it being a massive part of Final Fantasy XII's combat system, and really the game as a whole, you don't have to use it. And it's for this reason that a lot of people dislike the Gambit system from 12, because they think it puts the game on autopilot. And from a very technical perspective, yeah, that's kind of what it is, because it's, combat's fully automated, your characters are doing kind of everything. But again, as I just mentioned, you have the freedom to turn this shit off. Like, people will turn this on, play the game on autopilot, and complain that it's on autopilot when you don't have to use it, which is the weirdest complaint to me. But also, as somebody who's played through Final Fantasy XII in an immense amount of times over the years, I can tell you how tedious it would fucking be if you had to, like, micromanage every aspect of combat in this game. You had to individually attack with every character, individually have to heal with every character, revive, cure status elements, use specific magics on specific enemies. Like, that shit is grueling when you play other Final Fantasy games. You come to something like Final Fantasy XII where you can set it all up to automatically do it. Like, what is the benefit, really, of having to manually, like, use a Phoenix down on a dead character when the game can just do that for you? Like, that's a benefit. That's a positive, in my opinion. But also, I mostly use the Gambit system for the majority of the characters just to kind of cover my ass for, like, healing, curing status elements, and reviving and stuff like that. And you really just do, like, enemy highest HP attack. And that's it, really. Like, I'm not using it for, like, every single little tiny aspect of every single fight I do. 12 is not really a complicated game, and you can really get through the majority of the content of the game with just, like, auto-attacking and just kind of healing and curing status elements with the Gambit system. You don't have to, like, micromanage every single aspect of every single fight. Anyways, that was kind of my mini review of the Final Fantasy XII Gambit system. Hopping back to this translation, though, their lead battle programmer for Remake, as of 2020, wanted to make the AI in Remake Part 2, which we now know to be FF7 Rebirth, of course, to be better than the Gambit system in 12, which is certainly possible, but without an actual Gambit system implemented into Rebirth, kind of can't really do. For starters, if the AI in Rebirth was as intelligent as the Gambit system in 12 or better, there would be no real challenge, right? Because as soon as somebody loses X amount of health, it would automatically be healing a character. As soon as a character is inflicted with a status element, they'd automatically cure it. They'd automatically be using the best possible magics against enemies that are weak to those magics. Like, we kind of take the challenge out of Remake/Rebirth. I do also want to add as well that people were taking this information and, like, misconstruing it, thinking that Koyama was saying that there would be, like, an actual Gambit system implemented. People were like, I like the Gambit system from 12. I'm excited to see it in Rebirth. That type of, like, response. That's not what he's saying here. They're not going to add an actual Gambit system. He just wants like the AI teammates. Like if you're controlling Cloud, he would want like Barrett and Tifa or Aerith or whoever to like be intelligent and not just attack and defend. Like they'd be doing other things in the fight. Because right now, when you play Remake, if you're controlling one character, the other characters are just fighting and blocking, and that's it. And he's wanting the AI to be smarter than that, to where they're actually using like offensive magic, defensive magic, using items and those kind of things. Which of course is a positive. It's not something you really pay attention to if you get like really into the combat of Remake, because I don't think I ever really noticed or realized that that's all the AI is doing. Because when you're really into the combat, especially if you do like hard mode or something, you are constantly switching characters, right? Like you're moving from one character to the next throughout a fight. You're not just using one character the whole fight if you're really trying to optimize combat. So as you're constantly switching through characters, it's not really like the AI has a lot of time to do their own thing. Or at the very least, if you're controlling like one character through the majority of the fight, you're still like issuing commands to their characters as soon as they get an ATB gauge, right? And that's kind of the other problem here with like the 12's Gambit system versus like Remake's battle system. You have to have an ATB bar to do literally anything in combat outside of like basic attacks and like dodge rolling and blocking and stuff, right? Like you can't perform an action without some sort of ATB. So I don't know how the AI would be like super effective in combat if they constantly have to have an ATB to do anything, right? It's kind of like, it's a bittersweet thing because I love the combat in Remake, and again, if you play hard mode, you really, really appreciate the nuances of combat. Like, there's aspects of it I think could have been a little bit better. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of having to have an ATB charge to use items. Like, sure, if you could just freely use items all you wanted, it'd probably make the game a little bit easy, but you can't use items in hard mode anyways, right? So it's like, it's only there to like make normal or easy mode, air quotes, harder, even though they're not hard at all. And then wanting to make the AI smarter for Rebirth is obviously a great thing, but they're always going to be hindered by the ATB system since they have to have a charge to do pretty much anything. Let's also not forget that if the AI is like just using up their own ATB charges to do shit, that could be a problem, right? Because you might want to micromanage that stuff because obviously you have very limited. You can only have 2 at a time unless you use like the refocus, limit break, or whatever. Like you're stuck with only 2 charges at a time, and you got to use those kind of as soon as you get them. If the AI is just off doing its own thing, constantly burning up their own ATBs, that would be an issue, especially if you're playing like hard mode or something. So I think if they were going to go this route for FF7 Rebirth, it'd have to be like a setting that you could toggle on and off. Like maybe if you're not that great at combat, you could turn it on so that your teammates are kind of handling like that aspect of the game. You can just focus on using one character, and your AI teammates are like healing and reviving as is needed, right? Whereas like people who are more into it probably wouldn't even want to have that on, because like if I'm playing the game now that I understand the combat of Remake and shit after playing through hard mode and the base game a bunch of times, like I don't want the AI using a goddamn ATB gauge at all unless I say so. Something else they could do that'd be a little more simplified is implement a system very similar to Kingdom Hearts where you can control like the AI for Donald and Goofy and make it to where they do certain things more often or less, right? I think this would honestly be like a really cool idea because you have like Barrett sort of like the ranged tank of Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? It'd be kind of cool if you could like set his AI to be more into that role of being like a tank and absorbing damage for other players. Aerith is obviously like the white mage for FF7. You can maybe make her AI more of like a dedicated healer. Tifa's obviously really, really great at staggering, so maybe you could set her AI to stagger more often. And this is actually one of the things that I'm really excited to see when it comes to Rebirth, besides, you know, every other aspect of the game, because I want to see everything, is how they're going to change or improve the combat for the second game, right? Because that's got to happen. They're definitely going to bring in like the teammate attacks that they had from episode intermission. I'm kind of curious to see what the hell they're going to do with combination attacks between like the party members and stuff. But like, how else are they going to change the combat? Because it can't just be 100% the same. They got to do something new, something to improve it. They don't need to do an overhaul or anything because I think the combat's fine. But I'm kind of curious what they're going to do. And maybe more intelligent AI is one of those things. Anyways, my dudes, that is pretty much the video. Of course, pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on this? Did you enjoy Final Fantasy XII? Did you like the Gambit system? Did you hate the Gambit system? What are your thoughts on the AI in Rebirth being as good or better than the AI for Final Fantasy XII? Which I think is kind of an impossibility just because how intricate you can do the Gambit system. Like, you can make it to where you heal your teammates at 10% health, 20% health, 30, 70, whatever you want to do, right? Like, there's so much, like, intricacies to that it'd be so hard to make the AI always that good. But also, again, the AI in this game would be hindered by the ATB system anyways. Either way, that's the video, my dudes. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. And that's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine or leave it like Obey.